Thank you so much for having me. I wish I could be there in person, particularly as a USC alum. I'm familiar with that space. It's beautiful. So I'll give you an overview of this paper. I co-wrote it with Jesi Brooks, who is the GC of Ribbit Capital, the venture fund. Jesi is formerly a longtime AUSA who dealt with national security work, amongst other things. I am obviously GC of StarkWare. I'm an ex-DeFi GC and also an ex-centralized exchange CLO after many years of being a partner at King & Spalding in government investigations. So Jesi and I share the belief that crypto and DeFi are in the process of maturation. And there's a way to improve upon the status quo within DeFi without re-intermediating DeFi or necessarily regulating DeFi. But if DeFi wants to continue to take the position of a total lack of regulation, then there needs to be a holistic maturation within the kind of risk architecture of DeFi. So table setting, the paper is not about requiring, but about suggesting protocol level optionality where risk management tools can be natively embedded in smart contracts or token standards, things that can effectively operate completely under the hood within DeFi without dictating how users interact or builders build. And the goal of the piece was really to start a conversation with legislators and policymakers, regulators, but also to suggest possible features for builders who may want to engage with institutional or regulated participants, builders who might have a lower appetite for risk. So these protocols at the building phase, along with their community, can adopt what fits their design and values. And we think that this conversation makes particular sense at this stage where we have traditional players coming online and we're seeing a convergence to a certain degree within kind of DeFi and trad markets. We don't want, nor do we think it's possible to have kind of a one-size-fits-all model. As we all know, there's kind of a massive spectrum within DeFi from the truly total permissionless architecture to a somewhat permissioned architecture. Query whether someone consider that DeFi a conversation at a different time. But the idea is to really enable these capabilities and educate individuals, builders, and regulators on the options that exist today. And we really believe a lot of this is technically feasible without forcing design changes or disruptions to the UX. The whole point is kind of to strive for conversation, experimentation, interoperability, and educate a lot of people on the existence of these tools as opposed to imposing some sort of compliance template on DeFi, which is particularly unadvisable since no one can agree wholly on what DeFi is. That was actually one of our biggest struggles, was kind of the definition of DeFi, and that is really up for debate and is obviously creating some issues and some friction with the legislative environment vis-a-vis DeFi. So moving a little specifically more to risk scoring, the paper focuses on standards for risk scoring within this kind of environment of programmable risk management, meaning particularly the ability to use on-chain data, identity attestations, behavioral heuristics, and smart contract logic. And all of this maintains DeFi's openness while focusing attention and controls where risk is greatest, thereby aligning kind of the technical realities with policymakers' objectives and concerns. A few important points to make about all of this. A lot of you are aware that risk scoring is already being used in crypto and has been used in TradFi for many years. This is a natural process of maturation, and risk scoring is uniquely well suited within DeFi. So a risk scoring paradigm particularly makes sense because it leverages the data-rich features inherent to blockchain-based tech. In TradFi, the data is really siloed across intermediaries and institutions, but in DeFi, we're working with public immutable ledgers that can serve as dynamic engines. So this means these systems can adapt and respond in real time or even prior to transaction execution itself. On that point, before we get a little bit to Minority Report, that Tom Cruise movie where they anticipated crimes, I want to talk briefly about data inputs and metrics. So the beauty of all of this is, and again, this technology exists today. These risk inputs can be tailored to jurisdictions, users, goals of the community, and the focus to be on transparency, behavior, and verifiable proof. So the specific parameters we discuss in the paper are wallet or address level transaction history, provenance data, the lineage, verifiable credentials. One example of that being used right now is the Solana attestation service. And, my personal favorite, the use of ZK proofs. This also means that a protocol could have layers of verification with a design scoring model that affords more weight to the trust level, just like, a passport is more credible than a phone bill. Although on that note, nothing of that is credible due to the growth of AI. Behavioral heuristics, and I mean machine learning to identify transaction patterns that suggest problematic behavior, wallets that rapidly interact with unaudited contracts, for example. And finally, very importantly, AI agent signaling. So this is logic that can be implemented that effectively susses out agentic activity and thus prompts stricter review. And we're obviously seeing explosive growth of AI agents on chain. One other note here, I personally feel very passionate about privacy. It's something StarkWare is obviously focused on. It should be the default here. And I think this is an important part of the conversation right now. If you go to any crypto conference, especially an institutional one, everyone is obsessively talking about payments, tokenization, and stables, right? So, one day, if you tokenize all the assets and bring them on chain, realistically, from just a competitive standpoint, you're not going to have major hedge funds or financial institutions wanting to do all of their trading on chain with that degree of visibility. So from the very commercial standpoint, privacy needs to be part of the conversation, apart from the principles of, privacy as an American fundamental right. So ZK proofs and selective disclosures can allow users to prove a host of things, for example, that they're not sanctioned actors, and these credentials can be revocable and theoretically portable. So privacy as the normal essentially shifts the compliance model from one of constant surveillance to one of verifiable trust. Last point I'll make, and then I'll pause. What would a risk scoring standard look like? It's a very difficult question. We're still very early in this discussion. I like drawing a parallel to the use of blockchain analytics and smart contract audits in DeFi. These were industry-imposed, self-imposed standards. I'll also note that there's often an embrace of these ideas when it comes to hack risk. For example, seals efforts. Everyone within DeFi wants to do everything they can to ensure the integrity of contracts. But there is also occasionally a knee-jerk negative or defensive reaction when these concepts are raised in the context of regulatory or criminal risk. That should not be the case. These conversations need to happen, and they need to happen now if the industry wants to mature and grow and not plateau. So I would encourage all of you to check out the paper. I would encourage you to send it to legislators and policymakers, but also to builders. One of my favorite parts of the paper is actually a chart at the end where we walk through all of the optional functionality that exists. My dream is that a builder, before he or she sits down to build, goes through and just considers, am I even aware of these options? Are they appropriate for the tech that I'm building? So we strive to be thought-provoking. Back to you, Paul, unless anyone has any questions.